today on Ag News Daily. And are really looking at things that the industry can celebrate in terms of positives, where they can get better in terms of continuous improvement, but also providing people with data points that they can use to bring back and further research or policy, or whatever that might be. And there's a lot of things that we've never captured before. Welcome back to the weekly edition of the Ag News Daily Show. Tanner here, hanging out at the United States Custom Harvesters Incorporated Convention here in Des Moines, Iowa. So a little different view for you here. But we're going to kick things off right away with the weather. Temperatures remain above normal for most of the Midwest this week. Mild, dry, and breezy weather covers most of the region. A larger system has moved in here through the end of the week with mostly rain and a little bit of snow on the northern edge. This weekend, a clipper will move through, bringing a burst of milder air through, but there may be another system that comes later next week to push through into the entire Midwest region. Water levels are falling near low water marks this week in several spots along that Mississippi River, though we've seen the southern areas having enough rainfall to limit the fall of the river system there. Warmer air is causing some of these ice jams in some of the local river systems that feed the Mississippi, and that storm system moving through at the end of the week could provide more precipitation to support water levels to stop that from failing. Here in the Midwest, we've had warmer than average temperatures, especially for the month of January. We saw the White House Office of Management and Budget has officially withdrawn the sweeping spending freeze implemented by President Trump earlier this week, but not before it caused widespread concern, including members of Congress. The freeze was first announced on Monday, and by Wednesday, the White House had rescinded it after a judge shut it down a day prior. President Trump's directive intended to scrub federal spending that caused a lot of confusion as programs were halted or were in doubt. Amongst them were meat, poultry, egg inspections, farm disaster payments, and even efforts to tackle bird flu. The freeze put an estimate of $3 trillion, roughly 30% of the federal government's annual budget, under uncertainty for that moment. And to add clarity for you as the listeners, while you may not have heard rumors through this week, this order has since been blocked. We will remain committed to keeping you updated with accurate information as this comes place. We saw the U.S. Senate voted 56-42 on Wednesday to confirm Lee Zeldin as the new EPA administrator. Following the confirmation, several ag industry groups, including biofuel advocates, released their statements outlining their priorities for this new administrator. Ethan Lane, the vice president of government affairs of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, said for too long the EPA has stood for ending production agriculture. Under Administrator Zeldin, we look forward to an EPA that acknowledges the conservation efforts that are being made possible by cattle farmers and ranchers, America's original conservationists. Illinois corn farmer and National Corn Growers Association President Kenneth Hartman Jr. said that it was encouraging to hear Zeldin understood the importance of extending year-round nationwide sales of E15 during his confirmation hearing. Growth Energy's CEO Emily Skor said the Administrator Zeldin has made it clear that he understands how important American-made biofuels are to President Trump's efforts to unleash the American energy dominance. Also this week, the Trump administration nominee for Secretary of Health and Human Services faced questions from the U.S. Senate Finance Committee on Wednesday regarding his stance on agricultural issues. During that hearing, he emphasized his commitment to working alongside the USDA, stating that we need to ensure that we don't lose more farmers in this country. He expressed supporting helping farmers transition to regenerative ag while addressing concerns of chemical-intensive practices, which he claimed were degrading soil health and harming public health. Farm and food groups have voiced their concerns over Kennedy's nomination, citing his past statements on pesticides, processed foods, and agricultural production and seed oils. However, Kennedy defended his ag background, noting that he was a 4-H kid and spent summers working on ranches himself. But despite his focus on collaboration with USDA Secretary Rollins, Kennedy aligned with Senator Chuck Grassley, the Republican out of Iowa, who asserted, "I expect you to leave agricultural practice regulations to the proper agencies," and for the most part, that would be of the USDA and EPA. Kennedy also appeared before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee yesterday on Thursday, January 30th. The Panama Canal has been in the news. It's facing some scrutiny. President Trump expressed concerns over the Chinese influence and suggested a potential U.S. action during the inaugural address.
The Panama Canal has been at the center of controversy since the U.S. turned it over to Panama in 2000 under a treaty that was signed in 1977. The ag industry is closely watching what happens because any disruption to critical logistics would hurt U.S. exports. President Trump argues that U.S. ships have been unfairly charged for access. However, Mike Steenhoek, executive director of Soy Transportation Coalition, attributes rising freight costs to drought-related restrictions rather than unfair pricing. He also notes the canal tolls are transparent and government by treaty and regulations creates this. Steenhoek says part of the treaty made sure that the government is on a neutral basis, so no one country or one industry can receive presidential or preferential treatments. And he continues, the tolls are very public and how they are assessed based upon the different types of vessels, the tonnage, and the utilization of that canal. Meanwhile, President of Panama has declared the country's control of the canal as a non-negotiable. At the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transport Committee hearing, lawmakers and the Federal Maritime Commission highlighted the challenges facing U.S. ag trade due to the canal's administrative policies. U.S. soybeans are the canal's top ag export, Steenhoek says. Additionally, that it was mentioned at the same Senate hearing, cotton, livestock, and dairy producers were also users of that canal. An audit is in progress from the Panamanian authorities initiating the audit of the Panama Ports Company. We also saw in the United States, they reported their first outbreak of H5N9 bird flu in poultry and on a duck farm in California. The bird flu strain is less common and typically causes milder symptoms in birds than the H5N1 that we're familiar with, although it is more dangerous to both birds and humans. The Reuters said the authorities also detected more common H5N1 strain in the same farm in Merced County, California. Almost 119,000 birds on that farm have been killed since December 2nd. A recent outbreak of the bird flu on a poultry operation in Georgia, the biggest chicken producer in the U.S., is set to trigger trade restrictions from major meat importers. Reuters said the industry group warned last week that a movement of kind could financially harm farmers and processors. USDA's most recent egg outlook says egg prices were predicted to increase by 20% in 2025 compared to the 2.2% overall for food prices. USA Today says USDA has attributed the rising costs to these bird flu outbreaks and the cause of straining on the number of egg layers. Since the federal and state government officials began tracking in February of 22, at least 1,400 outbreaks have been reported in nearly 600 counties nationwide, affecting over 135 million birds. Well, questions like, how has your company completed a third-party social workplace accountability audit? To what does your company offer for family support or benefits for workers? Are just some of the questions in the first sustainability report for the entire U.S. supply chain and poultry industry. The report was released last week at the International Production of Processing Expo in Atlanta, Georgia, where our Ag News Daily reporter and producer Michelle Stangler was. It brings together typically around 28,000 people from various parts of the poultry industry, including the production and processing of eggs and meat, in the addition to the feed industry. So let's get to her interview now, where Michelle discusses what it means and how farmers beyond the poultry industry can think about this report right after our message today.
Calving season is a favorite time of year, but along with that special time are dangers, extra stress, and increased labor. Safety Zone calf catchers are all about safety and making processing new calves easier. Designed for ATVs or UTVs, one person can do the job and never be threatened by the protective mother cow. Make this and every calving season safer and easier with a Safety Zone calf catcher. Watch videos and customer testimonials or order yours today at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914. Affordable and made in the USA. Make your upcoming and all future calving seasons safer, easier, and stress-free. Durable and designed to work anywhere you can drive your ATV or UTV. Order online at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914 today.
Well, we're here talking about a report. Now, sustainability, it means a lot, but running into what this report means, I'm here with Ryan Bennett with the US Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs. So, Ryan, tell me first about who is the US Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs?
The Roundtable is a group of stakeholders from all across the supply chain. So anything from growers to integrators and processors of poultry and egg products to allied industry, which could include anything from equipment to medicine to feed, all the way through retail and food service companies are involved, as well as civil society. So that includes academics, trade associations, NGOs that all have a place in the poultry and egg sector and throughout the entire supply chain. So we have everybody involved in the production of chicken, turkey, and eggs at the table, all deciding where we're going to go on sustainability.
So you just released a report, and it's 70 pages?
Yeah, and it just released today, and that report is the first ever sustainability report for the entire chicken, turkey, and egg sector in the United States, and really details a lot of things, some of which we thought we knew and some of which we have never released before. So it's about roughly just over 90 different data points that go through our three pillars of people, planet, and poultry. We're really focused on being environmentally sound, socially responsible, and economically viable, so our metrics kind of follow in that mold. And are really looking at things that the industry can celebrate in terms of positives, where they can get better in terms of continuous improvement, but also providing people with data points that they can use to bring back and further research or policy or whatever that might be. And there's a lot of things that we've never captured before in this report. So this is our first time. It's based on 2023 data, and it encompasses roughly half the birds in the United States.
So when you say first, what do you mean by that? Because I assume there's been some sustainability metrics done in the past.
Yeah, there's a lot of sustainability metrics. Part of what we're doing is creating metrics that actually are material to or meaningful to the U.S. poultry and egg supply chain. So we started out with our members and a lot of external advisors going through and figuring out what's important to us or what do we impact the most. And then we built metrics to measure that. And those metrics are designed both, to share where we're at, but also give us an inkling of where we need to focus our time to get better and to continually involve the program as well as our members to help themselves figure out where they want to spend their time. Because there's a lot of different aspects involved with sustainability. So a lot of people think that it's just environmental, but like I said before, we're focused on people and planet and poultry, and we have a lot of different aspects of the program that are focused on all three of those major pillars.
Now, this challenge or opportunity, when we think about sustainability, is across the agriculture, food, and environmental chain, you could say. But specific to poultry, what were some of those metrics that you did find, some of those key learning points?
I think you can look at our people sector. We're really focused on obviously keeping our workers safe and looking at the data there in terms of where we've come from and where we're at below general manufacturing, but below food processing in terms of our incident rate on safety incidents. It's a really positive story to tell that we're going to continue to get better at and continue making sure that our workers are safe. Looking at really uncovering a lot of the work that our members have done in the planet arena in terms of feed. We have a lot of our members know more about where their feed is coming from than maybe what we would have expected. So that's kind of an area that's not within our supply chain that we don't necessarily have as much control over because we're not producing the feed, we're buyers of feed. So the fact that we have some of those data points to now know where to go from here on feed, which is, obviously our biggest input within the industry is purchase of, mostly corn and soybeans. So we're going to have a lot more information to work off of than we realized that we had. And then obviously related to poultry, our members are really focused on things like animal welfare. And there's a lot of data to support that we've never generated in the past, as well as things like biosecurity where with things like metapneumovirus and avian influenza being obviously hot topics and impacting the industry at a high level right now. We have a lot of data to share about what we're doing well there, but also, continually refocusing on building up our biosecurity and trying to do better and better there as well. So those are some of the high points. There's a lot of, like I said, there's over 90 different things, so there's a lot to look through, and we're still working through it ourselves to inform the organization where it goes from here.
I'm just looking at the report here, and some of the questions that you asked, like what percent of your full-time employees are provided benefits, and that's 100% of employees in the broiler, turkey, and ag industry. So it's some of those questions where when I think about sustainability, of course, my mind goes environmental, but there are some other aspects. So how did some of these questions come up about sustainability? How does that relate?
I think when you look at, obviously we're major employers in a lot of different regions of the United States. And I think it's something that we need to do a better job of telling our story on, but also telling the story of what those jobs actually mean to the people that are working for these companies. And we're doing a lot more than I think what we're taking credit for. And I think when you saw during COVID, there was a lot of, there was some negative press about that. We didn't necessarily have the data points to share about all the good things that we're actually doing. And I think, in the future, I think that will allow us to take credit for all those, what we're providing for our employees, but also to identify areas where we can continue to do it better.
Do you have any of those key numbers that were really of interest to you when you think about the report?
I mentioned before the kind of the safety numbers and how well we're doing there in comparison to other industries. I mentioned the feed data. We know a lot more about our feed supply chain. That we've got a lot to learn, but we know a lot more about our feed supply chain than maybe what we realized going into this. And then there was a lot of numbers in there that I think we kind of expected, but had never really been captured before.
So some of those points where I'm seeing now is, what percentage of your annual feed grains can you follow to a point of origin? And here, what the data is showing me is that 100% for broilers, 50% turkey, and 92% for eggs.
For the state. We can follow it to the state of origin, which is actually higher percentages than we thought. Like I said, there's still gaps there. They're not all 100%, but a lot of our members do know where their grain is coming from their state. So that allows us to get more accurate numbers in terms of what their impacts actually are, but also what states we need to be working in and focusing on to make those impacts even less over time.
It's just asking some of these questions that I bet a lot of people have curious questions too. So what do you hope people do with this information? Who do you hope uses it? And then going to what do you hope they do?
Yeah, I think our members can use it to baseline themselves to figure out where they need to get better in comparison to what their peers are doing. I think also researchers can use this data to figure out where we need to find more opportunities to drive continuous improvement. I think policymakers or policy setting organizations can use this to help inform themselves to either create better policy, more focused on what's actually going on the ground, or to take credit for the things that we're already doing. And then I also think, obviously, the general public needs to know that we're doing a lot more than what they realize that we're doing in so many different areas that are important to them.
And up until this point, can you talk about sustainability? Are companies continuing to grow in this area? Have they taken a step back in some of those efforts?
I think companies are doing more now in sustainability than they've ever done, and I think they continue to do more. I think what's changed is it's not necessarily a new thing that is nebulous that they haven't gotten their arms around. So we have definitions of sustainability. Like I said, we're focused on being environmentally sound, socially responsible, economically viable. We know what the metrics are. We know how to report. Things that we never had, even 5-6 years ago, we're able to do now. I think what you've seen change is it's maybe not as new and scary as it was when, people first were being asked to really share a lot of data that maybe they didn't have. So I think really the focus here is, now that we can actually capture data and share it, is to make sure that we're continuously improving in the areas that we need to get better at.
It's being talked about maybe a bit more.
Yeah.
And reasonable maybe too.
Yeah. So I think it's a little less scary for people. I think what our focus is now is not just reporting, not just generating a number, but also making sure that number is going to continue to get better, at least on trend going forward.
Now, I know we're talking poultry here, but as we look at across the agriculture industry, is this topic of metric reporting, is that being talked among your colleagues when you talk to, maybe if you interact with dairy or beef people? Is it something that they're looking into trying to provide more of a basis of some kind of analytics?
Yeah, I think agricultural producers, especially in the animal protein space, are all being asked to provide more of this information. So when you look at the US Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, if you look at the Pork Board or the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, they're all working on this in some capacity. I think what's important that we all work on it in a way that makes sense to us or what's material to our supply chain, and that's what we've done at the Roundtable. But then where we're all using corn and soybeans, for example, there's opportunities on the feed angle for us all to work together and maybe harmonize around some of those types of metrics as well going forward. So it is a very much a hot topic across, especially the animal protein space. We're doing our part in poultry and eggs and measuring things in a way that makes sense to us and our supply chain, because obviously they're all different. And I think it's important to ask questions and measure things in a way that makes sense to the people answering them and not just kind of blanket ask a question across the entire animal protein sector.
Well, thank you so much for joining. Where can people find more information?
The report's available at US-RSPE.org under our resources page.
Well, thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for doing that, Michelle. This week, the American Farm Bureau Federation's annual convention policies were adapted, and the discussions of what to advocate for this year. No major changes came in the Farm Bill language. Some new language was added to crop insurance. Delegates called for an educational component of the SNAP program. Policies include opposition to any and all forms of diversity and equity and inclusion, or being forced to be put into public school systems funded by government entities. Support and comprehensive immigration reform was a key. Supported more clarity on the H-2A housing inspections and fines. Supported of continuous border or barrier fence along the U.S. and Mexico border. Support finding companies that received broadband loans or grants if they failed to quickly build out infrastructure. Support and reimbursement of farmers for biosecurity and infrastructure to support. Such a long list there as well. We also saw additionally Farm Bureau delegates approved a bylaw amendment requiring special payments from any state organization whose AFBF membership is subject to a pending but not yet effective termination. Delegates voted 293 to 48 in favor of that adjustment. Illinois Farm Bureau President Brian Duncan said he was disappointed but not surprised, as we've reported on that. The board of directors voted November 7th to terminate that membership of Illinois Farm Bureau in the national organization. It is effective as of December 20th after IFB informed them that their county financial insurance company was changing the underwriting rules that were no longer requiring policyholders to be Farm Bureau members. Well, let's have a little bit of fun here at Ag News Daily, bringing you some insightful conversations with folks in the ag industry. Let's hear one more time from Michelle to see if you can guess what we're going to hear about on next week's interview.
Coming up on next week's show, learn how a pushback with Georgia peanuts are creating opportunities. I heard from a board member, part of the Georgia Peanut Commission, State Checkoff. And now he's not only a peanut producer, but also poultry and a corn producer. Hear how his thoughts about promotion and education efforts and how Checkoff in his state is going to be related to your state as well.
2025 has started off strong when we look at the fertilizer markets. Josh Linville of StoneX told reporters in an email that he sent. 2025 started with corn acreage numbers at 92 million acres. Now some of the market estimates a high of 95 to 96 million. This means this is a big boost for all fertilizer demand, which is worrisome for this time in the calendar. Time's running out to get producers the product in place before they need it. Globally, European Union has produced additional tariffs on Russian-produced fertilizer. Linville says, while not confirmed, it sees a lot of traction and more to happen. He also mentioned the tariff threat against Canada is mainly a potash issue and some urea that comes out of our North American neighbors. The biggest news in the markets is that we've been watching corn fund positions. The corn opens its interest high at a new record this week. Funds are now long over 300,000 contracts. Questions are starting to trickle in about how much further corn could go if the funds are already sitting in this long position. On the flip side, the trade is also increasingly placing more focus on President Trump's threats to impose tariffs. In a statement made last week, 25% of tariffs on all goods coming from Canada and Mexico could start as early as February 1st, along with 10% tariffs on Chinese goods. It does sound like trade representatives from both Canada and Mexico have been meeting with their U.S. delegations to avoid this at all possible costs. Overall, the sentiment is fairly positive for pro-trade administration with President Trump now in office. So we'll see how that plays with agriculture demand here in the U.S. So thanks for putting up with me by myself today for your news this week. Went through that a little bit quickly. It's exciting to be here at these live trade show events and really appreciate you guys as listeners. So make sure you check us out on all social media platforms. Send us interviews that we should be doing, or if you're going to be at a trade show, come and look us up. But for today, I think it's time to let you go.